Welcome to the history section.
In this podcast, we're looking at a truly transformative period, the late 10th and early 11th centuries.
Specifically, the relationship between the Holy Roman Emperors and the Papacy. It's a dynamic that really reshaped authority across Western Europe.
It did. And the content we're discussing is drawn from the academic sources covering this era.
So let's begin with Otto III. He becomes King of Germany and then Holy Roman Emperor in 996.
And he had this extraordinary ambition. It wasn't just about ruling. It was about, well, restoring an ideal.
A lost ideal. And this whole vision is summed up on his imperial seal.
Yes, the phrase Renovatio Imperii Romanorum.
The restoration of the Roman Empire. That's a mission statement, not just a title.
It absolutely is. He's deliberately placing himself in the tradition of Charlemagne. He saw that Carolingian model as the true, divinely ordained template for his own rule.
A universal Christian empire, with the emperor right at the top.
But there's a contradiction right from the start, isn't there? The seal says Romanorum of the Romans. But his empire wasn't really Roman in a geographical sense. Its center, its core identity, was German.
And Christian. The focus was Christian, not classical.
Exactly. And this put him in a very awkward position when it came to the head of the church in Rome.
In his mind, he was the supreme temporal head of Christendom.
Which meant the ultimate authority rested with him, the emperor, not with some spiritual figure in a city that was, constantly rebelling.
So he resolves this awkwardness with subordination. Simple as that.
For him, the Pope was essentially an imperial chaplain. His job was to manage the church, manage Rome, but according to the emperor's divine mission.
And to make that vision a reality, he makes a very decisive move right after his coronation.
He does. He appoints his own German cousin, Bruno, as Pope Gregory V in 996.
An appointment that really tells you everything you need to know about the view of papal autonomy, at least north of the Alps.
Oh, absolutely. The Germanic clergy were thrilled. We have writings from figures like Abbo of Fleury praising this choice.
He calls Gregory V a scion of the imperial house, a man of holiness and virtue.
Says the news was more precious than gold and costly stones. I mean, it shows a real expectation of imperial control over the papacy. They saw it as a good thing, a source of order.
But the view from inside Rome was quite different.
Starkly different. The sources make it clear the Romans, the citizens, the old aristocratic families, were deeply indignant.
It wasn't just that Gregory V was a foreigner.
No, it was the sheer dismissiveness of it all. Otto III seemed to have no regard for Rome's ancient primacy.
And once he's crowned and his cousin is installed, the emperor, who's still just a teenager, promptly leaves for Germany in June 996.
Which was a colossal political miscalculation. Maybe it was his youth, maybe overconfidence.
He got what he wanted, the imperial crown, and didn't bother to secure his appointee.
He just left Gregory V completely exposed. He failed to grasp the depth of that Roman resentment.
And the moment the emperor was over the Alps, that resentment boiled over.
It did. It crystallized around the figure of Senator Crescentius.
He leads this movement of angry Roman citizens, and they actually succeed in driving Gregory V out of the city,
forcing him into exile in Spoleto. And of course, Gregory immediately sends a message to his cousin asking for military help.
But Otto III's response time is, well, it's very revealing.
It is. Despite his grand mission of restoring the Roman Empire and protecting the church, he doesn't rush back.
No, he delays his departure until December of 997. And even then, he stops to celebrate Christmas on the way.
It really suggests that a Roman rebellion was secondary to his own imperial schedule. He was operating on a German timeline, not an Italian one.
So by the time Otto III and his army finally arrive in Rome, it's mid-February 998.
A full 14 months after Gregory V had been exiled.
And in that time, Crescentius and the Roman churchmen hadn't been idle. They had elected an anti-pope,
Johannes Philogathos. It was a direct challenge to the emperor's right to appoint the spiritual leader of Christendom.
But the moment that German army appears on the horizon, the resistance just crumbles.
The citizens were pragmatic. They opened the gates. Crescentius and his inner circle fell back to Hadrian's fortress.
The Castel Sant'Angelo, as we know it today.
And Otto III just settles in for a 2-month siege, determined to make an example of them.
And the retribution that follows is chilling. It's a real illustration of imperial rule.
He starves them out. After they surrender, Crescentius and 12 of his supporters are beheaded.
But that wasn't enough.
No. Their bodies were then hung upside down on the highest hill in Rome, the ultimate public indignity.
And the anti-pope, Johannes Philogathos, his fate was arguably even crueler.
More politically charged, certainly. He was captured trying to escape. The sources are quite specific. He was spared death, but only for a very deliberate mutilation.
They gouged out his eyes, cut off his nose and ears.
And then, in a final act of public humiliation, he was forced to ride backwards on a donkey through the streets of Rome.
A spectacle designed to completely shatter his spiritual authority.
It was a message. Otto III justified it with both secular and spiritual law. Crescentius was a traitor. Philagathos, a heretic.
Because for Otto, defying his will was the same as rebelling against God's entire plan for a Christian monarchy.
It's a critical moment. It demonstrates with brute force that the church was an instrument of the empire.
And this demonstration of power is quickly followed by another appointment. Gregory V dies suddenly.
Mysteriously, yes. And Otto immediately installs his former tutor, Gerbert, the Archbishop of Ravenna, a man known to be fully on board with the imperial agenda.
And Gerbert's choice of a papal name is maybe the most important piece of political branding in this entire era.
Sylvester II.
He's explicitly linking himself to Sylvester I, the Bishop of Rome during the time of Constantine the Great.
Right, and as the research reminds us, the historical Sylvester I was actually a fairly minor figure. He didn't even attend the Council of Nicaea.
But later legends, like the Acts of Saint Sylvester, had really inflated his role.
They turned him into a founding father. The story was that he had personally converted and baptized Constantine, and most importantly, received the donation of Constantine.
The famous forgery that supposedly granted popes temporal sovereignty over Italy.
So by choosing that name, Gerbert, now Sylvester II, is signaling he intends to be the new Sylvester to Otto III's new Constantine.
A partnership to build the Holy Roman Empire.
Exactly. And this new imperial-papal partnership quickly turns its attention to foreign policy.
To the Magyars, who had settled in the Carpathian Basin.
Yes, under Prince Giza and his son Stephen. Giza had already been baptized, which sort of opened the door for Western influence.
And Otto and Sylvester see Stephen not just as a convert, but as a potential ally, a buffer state on the eastern frontier.
And Sylvester II makes a brilliant move. He takes the initiative, asserting papal authority without needing an army.
The papal letter to Stephen begins with a revolutionary salutation.
Sylvester, bishop, to Stephen, king of the Hungarians.
By awarding him the title of king, the Pope is asserting the right of the spiritual authority to confer temporal royal status.
A right that the Holy Roman Emperor would have traditionally claimed for himself. The letter makes it very clear that the crown is a gift from St. Peter.
And that the new kingdom is now under the protection of the Holy Church. It was politically brilliant.
In the short term, yes. It extended influence without military cost. The letter even tries to cement this by saying Stephen's heirs should confess themselves the subjects of the Roman Church.
An attempt to make them papal vassals.
But Stephen, of course, had his own interpretation.
Naturally. He accepts the title, he accepts the jeweled cross, but he sees it as a confirmation of his independence as a sovereign Christian king.
He just sort of ignores the implication of subjection to Rome, and by extension to Otto III.
A classic medieval diplomatic maneuver. But this success in Hungary did nothing to help the situation back in Rome.
No. In fact, the collaboration between the German emperor and the Frankish pope, Sylvester II, only made the Romans angrier.
So in 1001, they rioted again.
Otto, lacking his full military strength, was advised to leave the city. He and Sylvester traveled north to Ravenna to gather German troops for a final decisive assault on Rome.
But while waiting for those reinforcements, tragedy strikes.
Otto III falls gravely ill, intense fevers, what they call the Italian death. His biographer, the Fietmar, described it as internal sores which gradually burst.
And in January of 1002, Otto III dies. He was 22 years old.
Unmarried, heirless. His grand dream of renovatio imperii Romanorum dies with him. His body is taken back across the Alps and buried next to Charlemagne.
And his death paves the way for a more pragmatic, German-focused vision of the empire.
The German nobles move quickly, electing Henry of Bavaria. He becomes King Henry II.
And he inherits a mess, especially in Italy. He spends 2 years fighting just to be crowned King of Italy in Pavia.
And he has to wait a full decade before Pope Benedict VIII crowns him Holy Roman Emperor in 1014. He had to prove he was competent first.
And the change in imperial focus is very clear. It's right there on his seal.
It is. Otto III had Renovatio Imperii Romanorum. Henry II's seal reads Renovatio Regni Francorum.
The restoration of the Frankish kingdom.
It's a huge shift. He's making the Germanness of the empire central. He's rejecting Otto's Roman dream and all the chaos that came with trying to govern that city. For him, power came from a unified Germany.
But despite that shift in philosophy, the methods of control were quite similar.
Very similar. He understood that power depended on controlling the church through lay investiture.
The king granting church positions, it was the engine of imperial patronage.
Absolutely. He filled bishoprics and abbeys with loyal German noblemen, ensuring the church acted, as the sources put it, as a faithful junior lieutenant of the emperor.
And he had a very specific policy to centralize land and wealth under his control. A strong, non-negotiable stance on clerical celibacy.
This was more than just a moral issue. It was brilliant political engineering.
Because a married priest could pass down land and wealth to his children.
Exactly. And over time, that creates hereditary ecclesiastical powers, local aristocrats who were less dependent on the emperor.
Whereas a childless priest meant that when he died, the post, the land, all the wealth, it all reverted back to the crown's control.
It allowed Henry to keep recycling those powerful posts to his most loyal supporters. He also had a clever way of dealing with church charters that promised free elections.
He'd accept them, but only if they added a specific clause.
Salvo tamen regis the fief imperatoris consensu.
Meaning the election wasn't valid without the emperor's consent.
It effectively gave him a veto over any candidate. History tells us he was constantly intervening, settling monastic disputes, and pushing his own candidates for German bishoprics.
And his intervention wasn't just political. There's a fascinating detail about him dictating liturgical practice.
Yes, while attending a service in Rome, he noticed the creed was sometimes omitted during Mass. He insisted it be permanently inserted into the Roman rite.
It shows an emperor who saw himself as a guardian of orthodoxy, comfortable dictating practice to the Pope himself.
His reign also saw a huge effort to systematize canon law. The German priest Burchard, Bishop of Worms, compiled a massive 20-volume collection.
And this collection inadvertently highlights the core conflict of the age.
It does. It contains these profound, unresolved contradictions about secular versus spiritual authority.
On the one hand, a canon states that resisting the emperor leads to excommunication because imperial power comes from God,
which validates the emperor's position. But then another canon says that no secular law can contradict God's law, which is implicitly superior.
And the collection offers no way to resolve this. It demands simultaneous respect for both kingly authority and church primacy. A clash was inevitable.
And that Saxon dynasty ends when Henry II dies unexpectedly in 1024 without an heir.
Which leads to the election of Conrad II and the beginning of the Salian dynasty.
And he follows the now standard pattern.
Yeah.
Secure Germany, fight in Italy, get crowned Holy Roman Emperor, which he does on Easter in 1027.
And he was quite successful geopolitically, incorporating Burgundy and Provence into the empire.
His coronation was facilitated by a very controversial pope, John XIX.
The brother of the previous pope. And the sources say he literally bought the papal throne.
He did, with a huge amount of personal wealth. And the most shocking part is that he was a layman when he bought it.
So he was rushed through all the church ranks, layman, priest, bishop, and consecrated pope in a single day.
It just shows the abysmal state of the papacy. It was
Yeah.
a piece of property traded by Roman families. John XIX sought an alliance with Conrad, but Conrad was, well, unimpressed.
Right. Conrad was a different kind of ruler. A good soldier, intelligent, but illiterate and completely uninterested in theology or the church-state relationship.
He ruled in a purely secular way. He expected obedience. If a bishop resisted, he was exiled or imprisoned like a rebellious soldier. He didn't want to purify the church, he just wanted to control it.
Conrad dies in 1039, but he'd already crowned his son, Henry the Black, as co-ruler.
So Henry III inherits the throne at 21. And he is a complete contrast to his father.
Literate, deeply engaged in church politics, he was tutored by priests and felt a real duty to both the earthly and heavenly realms.
And his priority was the purity of the church.
Which we see in his enforcement of the peace and truce of God.
Yes, this was a movement started by the church to limit the constant private warfare of the feudal lords. They would forbidden fighting on certain days and protected non-combatants.
And Henry III takes these church decrees and makes them royal law. In 1041, he decrees that the peace will be observed every week from Wednesday evening through Monday morning.
And he sets a powerful personal example. At a synod in 1043, he preaches about peace and publicly forgives all of his own enemies.
It's a masterstroke. He's using the power of the crown to enforce the church's own ideals.
But here's the paradox. By working for the church's purity, He makes it even more subordinate to him. He proves that the emperor is the only one who can truly bring order to Christendom.
And his sense of order was deeply offended by the state of the papacy he inherited.
John the 19th had sold the throne to his own nephew, Benedict the Ninth.
Who was, by all accounts, a terrible pope. He ruled for about 15 years, indulging in drinking and fornicating. A total embarrassment.
The Romans thought so too. In 1045, they drove him out and installed a new pope, Sylvester III.
But Benedict's powerful family used armed men to help him reclaim the title just 2 months later, so now there are 2 competing popes.
And then it gets even worse. Benedict the Ninth decides to sell the papal throne to his godfather, John Gratian, for 1,000 pounds of silver.
So Gratian becomes Pope Gregory VI.
But then Benedict changes his mind, possibly after a marriage proposal was rejected, and declares he's taking the seat back.
So by 1046, you have an unprecedented crisis, 3 competing popes. Benedict IX, Sylvester III, and Gregory VI, an institutional catastrophe.
And Henry III, though not yet emperor, decides he has the authority to intervene. The Pontificum Romanorum Vitae says he marches into Rome with a great force and an immense army.
He declares the papal throne vacant and summons all 3 claimants.
And what's amazing is the sacred authority he assumes. The Pontificum says he tried the case canonically and justly. He doesn't just dismiss them, he condemns all 3 with perpetual anathema.
He's using the Pope's own ultimate spiritual weapon excommunication. He is acting as the supreme judge of the Church.
It's the absolute high-water mark of imperial supremacy. Having cleared the field, he appoints a new, reform-minded pope, Clement II.
Who then, on Christmas Day, crowns Henry III as Holy Roman Emperor.
And immediately after, the Roman clergy and people reaffirm the old grant made to Otto I. The emperor has the right to create popes and bishops. No bishop could be consecrated without imperial investiture.
So the crown is now, unequivocally, the master of the Church. But having solved the sacred crisis, Henry then turns to a political one.
The Normans in southern Italy. For years, Norman mercenaries have been carving out their own domains there, creating a lot of instability.
Rather than a costly war, Henry opts for a political solution.
He does a peaceful tour of the south and, crucially, grants the most powerful Norman warrior, Drogo of Hauteville, an official imperial title.
Duke and Master of Italy, Count of the Normans of all Apulia and Calabria.
He essentially creates an official Norman state to keep the peace, but the peace is temporary.
Because a new Norman adventurer arrives. Robert Guiscard, Drogo's half-brother, also known as Robert the Fox.
Drogo gives him a single castle, which Robert uses as a base to violently seize more territory. The historian Anna Komnene says his career began with bloodshed and many murders.
And the local populace, terrified of the Normans, appeals to the only authority they can.
Not the emperor, who is far away in Germany, but the pope in Rome.
The pope is now Leo IX, another German noble and Henry III's cousin, and he's a reformer.
He is. He refuses the papacy until the Roman people approve him. He tries diplomacy with Drogo first, but it's too late.
A conspiracy erupts, and Drogo is assassinated in 1051.
Willian envoys then rush to Pope Leo, begging him to lead an army against the now diminished Normans.
And so, in a great historical irony, the reform-minded pope becomes the commander of an imperial army, leading German soldiers sent by his cousin Henry into battle.
The battle at the Fortor River was a complete disaster for the papal imperial forces. They were shattered.
And Robert Guiscard fought with exceptional savagery. William of Apulia describes him cutting off feet and hands, just wreaking havoc.
Pope Leo IX fled, but was besieged and forced to surrender.
But the Normans were smart. They didn't harm him. They held him in respectful captivity at Benevento.
And there, they forced him to grant them official papal recognition as the legitimate rulers of southern Italy, a huge shift in power forced on the papacy by the sword.
And the consequences of this go far beyond Italy. It contributes directly to the Great Schism.
Leo's assertion of authority over the southern duchies infuriated Michael Cerularius, the Patriarch of Constantinople,
who claimed spiritual authority over the Byzantine lands there. Cerularius resurrects old theological arguments and declares the Western Church heretical.
Leo, from his captivity, sends a delegation to Constantinople, led by the short-tempered Cardinal Humbert.
And the negotiations with the equally autocratic Cerularius go nowhere.
It ends with Cardinal Humbert marching into the Hagia Sophia and placing a formal excommunication of the Patriarch on the main altar.
Cerularius responds by burning the document and excommunicating the entire papal delegation.
Pope Leo IX dies in Rome in 1054, shortly after his release. never having responded to the counter-condemnation.
So both excommunications stood, and the year 1054 becomes the date of the Great Schism, the formal split between the Western Catholic and Eastern Orthodox churches.
And this turbulent period sees a rapid changing of the guard. Henry III dies in 1056, leaving his 6-year-old son, Henry IV, as king.
And the Norman Count, Humphrey, dies in 1057, allowing Robert Guiscard to consolidate all the Norman lands under his rule.
So with a child king in Germany and no strong emperor to protect Rome, the papacy has to adapt. In 1059, Pope Nicholas II makes a pragmatic choice.
He forms an alliance with the strongest power nearby, the Normans.
This is formalized in the Treaty of Melfi in 1059. The Pope recognizes Robert the Fox as ruler of southern Italy, and in return, Robert accepts the Pope's spiritual authority.
But the most crucial part of the treaty is a clause that renounces the emperor's special right to be the protector of the church.
Exactly. Nicholas II strips the emperor of his core sacred duty and transfers it to the Normans. The Normans even promise to fight for the Pope against any future emperor if necessary.
It's a formal declaration of independence from German imperial power.
And it's reinforced by a major internal church reform in the same year. A council declares that from now on, the Pope must be elected solely by the College of Cardinals.
Taking the power away from Roman families and, more importantly, from the Holy Roman Emperor, the Pope can now be chosen without any temporal oversight.
So when the young Henry IV finally grows up and becomes emperor, he's going to find a title that has been stripped of its two most precious rights:
The sacred role as defender of the church and the authority to name Peter's successor.
The Treaty of Melfi and the creation of the College of Cardinals definitively end the era of imperial supremacy. It sets the stage for the massive conflicts that are about to come.
Thanks for listening. We hope you enjoyed learning something new. That's all for now, but in case you didn't notice, there are a lot more episodes on this subject available on this channel. If you're enjoying these historical podcasts, please like and subscribe and share with other history buffs.
While this is an AI recording, the research that has gone into this production is comprehensive and focuses on very specific moments in history, designed to bring as much detail to the listener as possible. Thanks again for listening in.